Hey guys, I've got two interesting games to share with you this morning that I've just played, and they're two games against the same player with the same opening, actually. One when I'm playing white and the next one when I'm playing black. But they're both good examples of spotting when your opponent makes an early error and then jumping on it and punishing them. Okay, so good lessons for me to learn from this one. So here's the first game. So here I'm playing with the white pieces and I play knight to f3. My opponent replies with knight to f6, which is the Petrov defense, and I decide to bring my bishop out, and this is called the Urasov Gambit. Okay, technically it's a gambit because I'm leaving this pawn undefended in return for getting my pieces out into the board, accelerating my development, getting ready to castle, that kind of thing. Okay, so one option here is for black to capture the pawn. He doesn't do that. He plays a symmetrical game, so he brings his bishop out as well. Now we've got both of these e-pawns, the king's pawns, are still hanging. Okay. Next I play d3, which has the effect of defending my bishop and defending my e4 pawn. And it's a multi-purpose move because it allows my dark squared bishop to come out into the board, which is important, so I can complete development. Black now makes an error. It's not a massive error, but it is a little one because he's still left this pawn hanging, and I can now grab that pawn completely for free. I figure it out, I think about it, 20 seconds, I think about it, I can grab that pawn and I can always just come straight back to f3 if I need to. And also I need to check that I'm not in danger of this knight coming in and causing me problems there, but then, you know, I've always got bishop to e3, things like that. Okay, now my opponent then compounds his error by trying to kick the knight away, not realizing. So how long did he think about that? 8 seconds, right? He didn't realize that, didn't spot that I've now got two pieces looking at f7, the classic Achilles heel, right? And so I think the point of this video is learning to spot those things. So the first thing you've got to do, so I take 19 seconds over my next move, right? I spot that f7 is defended only by the king, and I double check, but it's very important when you see that your opponent has played a slow move, played an inaccuracy, or even a mistake, to jump on that and make them hurt for it, right? So I decided to go in with the knight. There was an option of also taking with the bishop. The bishop capture would come with check, which would force the king to move to one of these two squares, right? Because obviously the knight's covering d7. So it would force the king to move. Black would lose castling privileges. That's perfectly reasonable. But I chose to go in with the knight, grabbing the pawn, and with the classic queen rook fork. So I'm going to win material, and then I also realised that once the queen moves, because the queen's actually only got two squares anyway, because the knight's in the way, once the queen moves, if I capture the rook, I can probably even escape with my knight to g6. So the queen moves, I grab the rook, so I'm now a rook and two pawns in front. Okay, so the spider senses should be telling you when you are significantly in front in material and development, you've got to compound it. You've got to keep your foot on your opponent's throat, right, and make them pay for it. So this is an interesting little in-between move. So lots of options here. I could have played knight to g6, attacking the queen, but then maybe I could have then come here to f4 where it's defended by the bishop. That's a possibility. But I saw this one and I thought this is in the spirit of how I want to play, right? bishop to f7 check forces the king to move. All right, and I think there would have been a problem if the king had gone here. Yeah, the king couldn't go there because queen takes on g4 with check, and black is in even worse state than he was before. So the king has to go to d8. I then decide to castle, and now my opponent launches a counter-attack. Okay, but can they make it stick? So the queen comes down to h4. The immediate threat is queen takes h4 checkmate, but there are other threats as well. There are 3 attackers against f2 and only 2 defenders, right? I've got my rook and my king. So this is interesting. When your king is in the middle of an exchange sequence, right, it isn't in the sequence, right, because it can't put itself into check, right? The king can only be the last piece to capture in an exchange like that. So this could go, for example, knight takes, rook takes, and either queen or bishop takes, and the king cannot recapture. So effectively there's only 1 defender of f2 but 3 attackers, right? So it's starting to look a bit dangerous for me. But the immediate threat is I've got to deal with the checkmate thing. So obviously g3 doesn't work because queen comes in anyway. There's only 1 move. I have to play h3, completely forced. So bishop comes in, and I do capture, and queen does come in, right? So I've given away the exchange now, but I figure out that I can move my king to h1. So I spent a minute on this move, right? I figured it all out. The king can move to h1. Queen can't come to any of these squares because my queen will capture. The queen can come here with a threat of coming down to h2, but before the queen gets a chance to do that, I want to cause black some problems as well. So black now played, I think, maybe another inaccuracy. I think that queen to g3 would have been completely forcing, right? With the threat of queen to h2 mate. But I think that this is just a little bit of a slow move. And it allows me now, because this move frees up g5, it allows me to come in with developing my dark square bishop and putting the king in check. And this is now pretty unpleasant for black. So, you know, yes, there's the possibility of checkmate in 2, but you can't checkmate if you are too busy protecting your own king, right? So the king moves forward to d7, and I decide to capture the knight. Okay, so if we look at this, the knight is under threat. I move my king. The pawn comes up defending the knight. It's got to be a mistake because clearly, you know, the knight's on pre. In between move, makes the king move, developing another piece, and also getting closer to connecting my queen and my rook, which is important on the back rank. But fails to, maybe you didn't spot it, I don't know. Pawn proceeds down the board, and now I develop my knight, connecting queen and rook. And here the king moves again. Is that forced? I'm not really sure. Can't see the specific reason why that happens. But now, you know, again, I'm way ahead of material. This king's now on the run. I bring my bishop in with check. I bring my queen here, threatening to exchange queens now that the back rank is covered by the rook. Clearly that's not in black's interests. But here, the queen, I figure out, is no threat. Can't go to h3 because of the pawn, and can't go to h2 because king could take. So actually, although that queen is right in my king's face, I'm not too worried about it. I bring now my bishop now, and you can see now the power of having the bishop pair towards the end of the game. When they can work together like that, they can cover two adjacent diagonals and make like an impenetrable force field that the king can't get through. Black blocks, and I come in with an attack on the queen. And now this is an unusual one, because black now initiates an exchange or a sequence of captures while 7 material points down. So I'm actually up. I've got an additional knight and a bishop and a pawn over black. So when you're that far down in material, you want to develop your pieces, but you do not want to exchange a load of material off the board. The bishop takes pawn, I take the queen. Bishop takes queen, I take bishop, he takes bishop, and I take pawn. So we've come out completely equal from that exchange. But now my material advantage is far more significant. I have this extra knight, this extra bishop, and an extra pawn. Black has a knight and a rook that aren't even developed, and a king in the middle of the board. So it's a hopeless situation now. Knight comes out with a discovered attack on the knight. Knight moves out the way. Knight comes back to attack the bishop. Fair enough. I'm going to grab a pawn. Exchanging material is all good. Check. Moves out the way. King comes. Attack the rook. Counter attack. Knight moves out the way. Exchanging more material off. And now here's an interesting one. So this is a king fork. Not the most common type of fork. Knight forks are the most common type of fork by far. From my analysis. So it appears now that the king is attacking the pawn and the knight. The knight can get away, but because of the knight's going to move to a light coloured square wherever it goes. So from a light coloured square, it can only defend dark squares, right? So this knight cannot possibly defend this pawn. So I can't protect the knight and defend the pawn. I could play d4 and protect the knight, but that doesn't defend the pawn. So it looks like a piece is going to be lost. However, I spot that I have knight to g6 with a counterattack. So the king can take the pawn, but if he does so, I take the rook. So he's got to move the rook, and now c4 protects the pawn as well. So I'm happy about that. And here's a rook fork. Again, it appears that I'm going to lose some material, because the rook is attacking both my knight and my pawn, and we have the same situation. The knight's on a dark square, the pawn's on a light square. Wherever the knight moves, it's going on a light square where it's only looking at dark squares, and again we have the same motif. Knight to e4 check, forcing move, so black doesn't have time to capture the pawn. Black has to move his king, moves the king out the way, and now I grab the pawn while defending d3 again. So black is just losing material all over the place. Attacks the knight, and I come back in with check at e6. It's actually a fork as well. Fork on the king. So you can see there that black did mount, or tried to mount, an interesting counterattack in this game. There's only 2 more moves and then black resigns. But because I was able to spot black's early error, and I jumped on it and I made sure I punished him, okay? However, I have to show you that black, the same player, got his revenge in the next game. And it's funny because it was the exact same opening. e4, e5, knight to f3, knight to f6. So I'm kind of hoping that he grabs the pawn and that I can develop knight to c3 and go for the Stafford Gambit, which people don't seem to go for at the moment. He develops the bishop out. So this is the same opening that we had in the last game, the Urasov Gambit. Okay, white is ignoring the fact that this pawn is hanging and develops his bishop. And I'm feeling pretty good because I've won a couple of games this morning in attacking style, and I'm starting to think that I'm playing well. And that should be a warning. Okay, this is a nice aggressive move. d4 now. So d4, it's defended by queen and knight. It's attacked by pawn and knight 2 attackers, 2 defenders, therefore it's not really worth my time to initiate the exchange. I could capture the pawn, knight captures, no. Yeah. If I capture the pawn, knight takes back, and so on. But then I also have to consider, what if d captures e5? Okay, so if I don't exchange, or what if d5 is pushed by white, then my knight's going to be forced to move a second time. So in this situation I decide to capture. White castles, I bring out my bishop to c5, where it's doing a few jobs. It's a second defender on that pawn. So I'm actually a pawn up at this point. And it's looking down at the king. So it's a nice diagonal for that bishop to go on. Plus, it's obviously vacated the f1 square, giving my king an opportunity to castle. So I'm feeling nice and comfortable. Now, although I'm a pawn up, so I've captured on d4, white then offers a pawn on c3. And I just think at this point I was just feeling cocky. I felt like I was almost certain to win this game, whatever happens. So this is actually a 3rd attacker and only 2 defenders. So what do? Do I give up the pawn? Do I do something else? I decided to capture because I'm feeling cocky. Okay, and now e5 is pushed, attacking my knight, causing me problems. So I ignore that attack and think, okay, well, this is like an in-between move, because I've got pawn takes b2 with the threat of pawn takes rook and queens. Okay, so go Ben, we're looking really good. Bishop takes here. So now I'm 2 pawns up, right? But I failed to spot the danger. Can you see what the danger is in this position? And it's interesting because it's very similar to a move that I played in my first game this morning, not the one that I've shared today. And maybe I should have spotted it, that there is a significant threat in this position. Maybe I should have just castled straight away. What did I do? Oh yeah, I moved my knight out of the way, because clearly the knight's about to fall, the knight's under attack. I need to do something. Actually, what the computer said was the best move would be d5 at this point, with a counter-attack against the bishop. But I moved the knight out of the way, and now this is an error on my part, because I've opened myself up. f7, the Achilles heel of black, is in serious danger. I mean, I've been thinking about, what's this knight going to do? Am I in trouble there? If knight moves in, I've got like d5 there. I know, there are ways of stopping that, but I didn't notice queen to d5, and this is a horrible move. And I congratulated my opponent at this point. I'm thought for 2 minutes now, is there anything that I can do in this situation? So queens come here. One threat is queen takes f7 mate, and of course the queen is forking my knight. So horrible situation to be in. I decide the only thing I can do is castle. Queen captures knight. I now move my rook across. Queen comes back, renewing the threat against f7. I defend by putting my queen on e7. So I'm kind of alright at this point. I'm 2 pawns up, I'm a knight down, so I'm slightly behind in material. And then the knight is developed, final knight is developed. That's white completing development, connecting his rooks. And I decide to mount an attack against the queen. My knight is defended on that square, and the queen moves back to e4. And then it all starts to go horribly wrong. I play c6. And my idea is to play d5, because I see now that with the queen having moved to this square, this pawn is effectively pinned, right? Now, so if this pawn moves, if it captures anything, or is or disappears, then I can take the queen. Knight can recapture, but then I recapture and win the knight. Okay, so I win material. So it's effectively a pin. So my thought is, wouldn't it be great to play d5 with a fork on the bishop and the queen, and this pawn effectively pinned can't recapture en passant because of that. I win the knight. Okay, what a great idea. So I've prepared that move with c6. The queen now moves across to g4. Now can you see the next danger? Because I failed to see it. I was so enthralled with this idea that now I noticed that I could play d5, and although the queen's moved, d5 comes with a double threat. I'm attacking the bishop with my pawn, and there's a discovered attack against the queen, right? How could that possibly go wrong? And so I spent 24 seconds just making sure that this was a good idea, but there's something that I failed to spot, right? And this is why we say scan the board, look at the entire board. I've got 22 minutes on my clock, okay? And I go ahead and I play d5, but the next move effectively ends the game, okay? And so white does take the pawn en passant, all right? And it completely backfires, right? So now my queen's in danger, and I think, oh no, my queen, capture with the pawn, but then look at this. That bishop lurking there on b2, boom. Queen takes g7, checkmate, game over. So there's me with egg on my face, thinking that I was the one doing the spanking today. But no, my opponent, SAMR 1981, had other ideas and decided to dish out a bit of punishment of his own in the second game that we played. So very, very well played by white in this instance. Yes, he went down a couple of pawns at the start, but what was that a gambit all along? We shall see. Anyway, so thought I'd share this with you. Two great examples of your opponent making mistakes, and when you spot that, you go in and pounce. Don't get carried away if you think that you're in charge, but when you do have an advantage and you can capitalize, it's good to keep the pressure on, okay? But don't forget your defenses as well, and never forget king safety. Rule number one, and I suffered from it today, but it's all learning, it's all good lessons. Hope it's been useful for you. I'll see you next time.